Well, we're back in Syracuse, not in the studio, but the Chips podcast has returned. And Tyler Melito, first off, hi, that's me waving. He's Ryan Amick with a very nice ambiance of lighting going on. I dig that you got like this orange tint going, Ryan.
Yeah, it's the flag right here. It's an orange flag, and with the sunlight, because it acts kind of as a curtain, sunlight comes through and it kind of lightens up the room. Also, I do have orange LED lights going on, not in this section of the room, but yeah, it's a very orange feel in this room because I mean we are at Syracuse, we are the Orange Men, so we of course have to have some orange in our rooms. But yes,
Got my shirt
big
on.
event. Absolutely, we're both repping Syracuse, but like you were about to mention,
There was kind of a big event the other day. I don't know what it was.
yeah,
Something
yeah,
Super Bowl or like that. I don't know. Yeah, Super Bowl 55 happened yesterday. We're recording this on Monday, the day after. Tampa Bay Buccaneers captured their second world championship in franchise history by a score of 31-9 over the reigning champion Kansas City Chiefs. And Tom Brady, like I predicted, does it once again, getting his 7th ring. When we did our Super Bowl preview, Ryan, you took the Chiefs, I took the Bucs, and I'm going to give myself a pat on the back for that one because let's be real here. This game was not great. So.
Well, first I was going to say that was kind of, at least in my opinion, a pretty bold prediction going with the Bucs the way that you did, and they showed you why a lot of people high on the Chiefs were wrong last night because, I mean, they did essentially what they did all throughout the playoffs so far. They've had games where the opponent kind of just makes mistakes like the Chiefs did. They turn the ball over. They get called a lot of penalties. They just do things in the game that Tom Brady can take advantage of. And last night was just no different for Tampa Bay. There were 2 turnovers on the Chiefs' parts that came in the second half that kind of just sealed the victory for Tampa Bay. But the constant pressure they were applying to Patrick Mahomes and his Chiefs, I think, was the biggest factor in this game. And it led to just defensively for the Chiefs. They struggled with penalties, which I mentioned, 11-4 favored for the Chiefs. And offensively, they struggled against Tampa Bay's defense. So really, that's kind of why it was a bit of a surprise.
Yeah. First off with the pass rush, we mentioned it going in. That Eric Fisher injury really hurt Kansas City because when you got 2 really good and outside rushers in JPP and Shaq Barrett, which they showed in this game, that was going to prove to be a nightmare for them. JPP had 3 tackles total, 1 pass defense. Shaq Barrett had 1 tackle, 1 sack, and just 4 QB hits. JPP had 0. But they were providing pressure all night. Then you had Ndamukong Suh, a sack and a half himself. Cam Gill had a half a sack. Vita Vea was clogging up the middle. So those linemen for Tampa Bay really proved to give headaches on a beaten and battered Kansas City offensive line. And Patrick Mahomes tried to do everything he could. There were multiple throws where he is just barely inbounds, makes a great throw, probably should have been caught some of them. There was one that hit, I think, Darrell Williams right in the face that he didn't catch. He was sideways, like barely off the ground. It's an athletic marvel. And Patrick Mahomes, they were mentioning it on the broadcast, doing it all with a bad foot, bad toe, just trying to do something. And it was just not the Chiefs' day. The first double-digit loss of Patrick Mahomes' NFL career through 4 seasons, 3 seasons as a starter.
Yeah, so, he said it's like the toughest loss he's pretty much facing his career so far, and it's hard to disagree with that because he's barely lost. I don't think he has 10 losses in his career through the 3 years that he's played, which is pretty impressive.
No. He might have 3, and that might be a stretch.
And with his performance last night, he did as much as he could. I mean, you mentioned that there were plays where he was parallel to the ground, sideways in midair, and it made for a cool photo, but it just didn't turn out as a good play because it was a drop passes. Mahomes, there was one play he was backpedaling all game long. There was one play where he backpedaled on the sidelines in the 4th quarter, just no look, threw up a bomb in the end zone, and it was almost a touchdown, one-handed catch. I mean, there's so many crazy plays that usually we've seen in his highlight tapes. He's able to make those plays on most occasions, but Super Bowl obviously is nothing like what they've played in all this year. They had the Super Bowl experience last year against the 49ers, and they were down in that one in the 4th quarter. And there were big plays that Mahomes made, like the big one, Tyreek Hill. Like, they've made plays like this before. It made people like myself and a lot of people assume that Mahomes, come the second half, they were down 21-6. You expect him. He's overcome so many double-digit deficits in the playoffs. You thought maybe this could be another one, but yet it wasn't because of everything we've mentioned so far, because of the pressure they were putting on Mahomes, because of the fact that he was backpedaling all day on a bad toe injury with his left and right tackle missing time and not playing. So there's so many things on offense that was really underwhelming for the Chiefs, and 9 points you just never expect.
No.
Kansas City in a Super Bowl to not
No
score
touchdowns.
0 touchdowns all game long. I can't believe that. It's hard to believe.
It's very hard to believe. And what's funny about a couple of those plays, like we were mentioning, that were Mahomes, if those plays get caught and they're 4 touchdowns or for a first down, that changes the tide of the game. The fact that all of them seem to not go the Chiefs' way, that just shows how bad of a day it was. 1 or 2 of those plays go, and we have a completely different ball game on our hands. But hats off to the Buccaneers defense. You mentioned something else earlier in the penalties, and I want to touch on that because that was just an abysmal. The referees, it seemed like in that first half, were kind of ruining the game, at least in my opinion. Kansas City called for 11 total penalties for 120 yards. Tampa Bay called for 4 for 39. And a lot of those penalties for Kansas City seem to have come at the end of the first half. You had the pass interference call against Tyrann Mathieu on a pass that probably wouldn't have gotten caught by Mike Evans. Mike Evans is a great talent, but I don't think he was that dive out to catch it. Then to get the play in the end zone, the ball hit the back of the stands, hit the stands. I don't think Mike Evans would have catch that one either. So that's 2 right there. Then you have a holding penalty on the Tyrann Mathieu pick. I didn't honestly see the hold, but I'm sure that wasn't great. Then you have the unsportsmanlike conduct on Tyrann Mathieu after Brady taunted him first. So, and then also the offsides on the field goal that gave Kansas City or Tampa Bay the opportunity to score another touchdown instead of making it 10-3, making it 14-3. So these penalties left and right, maybe some of them were valid, but not all of them were. And I think the referees, you saw it on social media, calling penalties left and right. What was your assessment of that?
Yeah, I mean, you hit on all of the big penalty calls, all the big holding calls that people questioned in this game. There definitely were some questionable ones, not only because of the minimal jersey pulling, minimal hand touching. It didn't seem like there was much going on, but the fact that most of them, as you said, were pretty uncatchable, even for the standards of a Mike Evans. If he's not able to catch it, there should be no flag call. But I think the impact of the penalties were the ones, like you mentioned, where they impacted interception plays, where the Tyrann Mathieu pick is negated because of a somewhat ticky-tack holding call on the other side of the field. Then there's calls, the Buccaneers about to kick a field goal to end the second half, offsides call. Sure, that wasn't the ref's fault. That was more of the player's fault. That should never happen as a player. And that turned that into, instead of a 3-point drive, it turned into a 7-point drive. Built a 14-6 lead against Kansas City. And then with a minute to go in the second half, the Chiefs give up a touchdown. And that's, I think, where momentum started to shift, because down 14-6 going into halftime of the Super Bowl, you get the ball back at half. You have confidence there. You're an amazing offense. You had a rough half. The game planned well against you. It's a 1-score game. Let's go into the second half and win this thing. But the fact that in a minute's time, they let Tom Brady score a touchdown, hold a 2-touchdown lead into halftime, and then come out of halftime. They did kick a field goal, but then give up another touchdown in the beginning of the third quarter. 31-9 lead. I mean, Chiefs have come back from a lot of deficits. 31-9 in the Super Bowl in the third quarter. That's almost, we've seen that one time, and that was Tom Brady against the Falcons in a way. So just that comeback alone was just too much for them to overcome. And in the second half, they were almost hopeless. And that's why it was a bit of a dud in the second half. The Chiefs only scoring 3 points all second half long. So
very uncharacteristic. And let's talk about the Chiefs a little bit and their offense. Patrick Mahomes, 26 of 49, 270 yards, 2 interceptions, was sacked 3 times. And like we mentioned a little earlier, was on the run all night. Then you got the running backs. Le'Veon Bell, I don't believe played. Darrell Williams was 2 carries for 5 yards. Tyreek Hill, 1 carry for 5 yards. That's another thing that surprised me. Not a lot of jet sweep plays for Tyreek Hill. Patrick Mahomes had 5 carries on 33 yards. A lot of that was rushing. And then Clyde Edwards-Helaire, he had the one big run for 26 yards, but not much after that. It was only 9 for 64. Then you got the receivers. I mean, Travis Kelce, 10 catches, 133 yards, just proving why he is the best wide receiver in football, without question. But then you got Tyreek Hill, only 73 yards after a monster game he had in week 12 against Tampa Bay. And everyone's saying, oh, he's going to do that again. They're going to do that again. But then this Tampa Bay defense found a strategy. Todd Bowles drew something up. So instead of talking about Tampa Bay's defense, let's talk about Kansas City's offense. What from that really stood out for you? Because for me, my eyes, Kelce had a great game, but that was really it after that.
I'm absolutely shocked at how little Tyreek Hill did in this game because, of course, we saw in the regular season matchup, he went off. In this game, he had 200 less yards and 3 less touchdowns, which was a big reason why the Chiefs' offense struggled all game long. I mean, his game-breaking speed is something that he exposed in the Tampa offense during the regular season. Sure, they did adapt, and in the second half of that game, they did a pretty good job containing him. But I thought in his speed alone would have beat the coverage in some way. I thought a big Mahomes throw was coming at some point because we saw him gearing up for something, like we mentioned before, backpedaling, looking for somebody to throw deep to. Usually Hill's on the receiving ends of those plays. I don't think I saw maybe more than one deep throw to Hill that was even catchable. And when it did come his way, he didn't catch it. And they're just the ability to go down the field and get deep balls like that was a huge part of their offense. Tampa Bay completely eliminating that was huge. Of course, we both mentioned how JPP and Shaq Barrett off the edge absolutely destroyed their backup tackles. And the run game, like you mentioned, was pretty there was nothing really going on there. So I think Hill, if the Chiefs were able to win this one, I think Hill would have had a big second half, put up more big plays to get the Chiefs offense rolling because that was a huge part of their offense all season long. It was big in their win against the Bucs in the regular season, and I think it's a big reason why the Chiefs couldn't get anything done offensively.
I want to go back to Tyreek Hill first, but I think another thing is worth mentioning is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have the best run defense in the entire NFL. So when you have that good of a unit, that's going to negate any rushing attack you have. So I think really Tampa Bay knew, hey, we're really good at stopping the run, so we are going to devote the majority of our resources to stopping Tyreek Hill because that did not work last time. And as we saw yesterday, it worked today. But I think the thing with Tyreek Hill is also, have we seen now the blueprint on how to stop him and then thusly this Chiefs offense? Or will teams, because it was really two high safeties. Tony Romo, as much as I find him annoying, was highlighting that perfectly on the broadcast, showing that they had basically one corner on Tyreek Hill and then two safeties deep to deny any real threat of a deep throw. Sure, deep throws could come, but it was going to come at a cost. You're going to have at least two people in the vicinity of Tyreek Hill, and they wouldn't allow him to get play. So do we think next year and going forward we'll see more defenses like that against the Kansas City Chiefs and opponents basically saying, hey, you throw to Travis Kelce all you want for 5, 10, 11 yards, however many it is, but we are not going to let you have the 40-yard bomb to Tyreek Hill.
Yeah, I think teams would be smart to take that approach, of course, because taking out Tyreek Hill in this offense, as you mentioned, it leaves it really only to Mahomes and Kelce. I mean, he had big numbers in this game because he had wide open catches in the middle of the field for 10 yards. That would move the chains, but when it came to the red zone, when it came to actually putting up big stuff offensively, they were more limited to throw the ball in the middle of the Kelce and sometimes run with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So I think looking at some of this, nobody had more than 2 catches outside of Kelce and Hill, excuse me.
Yeah.
Because they saw that Hill, they were playing cover 2 and they were pretty much eliminating him from the game. They adapted and went to Kelce a lot, but I think what they should have done, maybe go to Edwards-Helaire in the flat, maybe go to some of their other receivers on slant plays, just go to the areas of the field where, because they're playing cover 2, they're leaving spots open for short routes, and look for other people to pass it to. Look for McCole Hardman to make a 2-yard catch and turn it into 20 yards with his speed. Sammy Watkins was playing his first game back. He only saw 1 catch in this game. I think if maybe he utilized some of his secondary weapons, that could have helped them in this effort. And I think next year, if they try to run this defense against Tyreek Hill and it starts to work, that should be their approach. That even though Kelce and Hill are the best pass catchers on this team, use your running backs more. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is a very dynamic running back. who can catch out of the backfield and run the ball. He'll be there next year. If they can use him in the passing game, if Hill is being double teamed and Kelsey's just maybe not being productive, go to Clyde Edwards-Helaire more. Go to McCole Hardman, Sammy Watkins, even if he's there next year. Just find other ways to create offense, because when they do take out one of the most explosive players in the league, it hurts this offense, and it's a big reason why they only scored 9 points on Sunday.
Definitely. Mecole Hardman, 2 catches for 4 yards on 6 targets. So clearly the Chiefs were not overly wanting to use him. And I think that's a great point that you made. Use Mecole Hardman just even as a decoy. Send him deep, because he is just as fast as Tyreek Hill, at least at times. So have Mecole Hardman go deep and threaten to say, hey, we are willing to go deep to Mecole Hardman. And then teams will be like, oh, they're going to go deep to Mecole. Here he goes. And then dump it off to Tyreek Hill or dump it off to Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Bring back Le'Veon Bell, who we have seen be a great pass catching back from his time at Pittsburgh. Obviously, a lot has changed since then, but he's still pretty good at that. Shifting gears to Tampa Bay and their offense. First of all, did they get the Super Bowl MVP right? Did Brady deserve his 5th Super Bowl MVP?
I mean, yeah, I think so. I don't think there's really anyone on the offensive end
Gronk?
that did. He had a big game, but I mean,
Devin White?
Tom Brady was running the show. He didn't make any mistakes, and he's the reason. I mean, Tampa Bay only was in the Super Bowl because of Tom Brady. They only won the Super Bowl really because of Tom Brady. He came to a 7-9 team and turned them into Super Bowl champions his first season there. So I think, sure, it shouldn't be narrative based and kind of on his season and his impact on the team. It should be more on just the game itself. But I think his stats alone, 200 yards, 3 touchdowns, and the impact he has on everyone on this team all throughout the season to get him to this point to actually win a Super Bowl. This is Tom Brady's team. They won because of the culture that Tom Brady brought, because of the play that he had in the playoffs. And I think it went to Tom Brady, and it should have went to Tom Brady. There were some players on the defensive end who played well as well, like Devin White. But I think with this award, they got it right with Tom Brady.
I agree. I think it would have had to have been a record-breaking performance by anyone other than Brady for him not to get the MVP. Like if Leonard Fournette rushed for 200 yards, it would have gone to him. If Gronk had 100 yards and 3 touchdowns, it would have gone to him. Speaking about Gronk, the best game he's had all season. 6 catches, 67 yards, 2 touchdowns, and he just further showed why he is Brady's safety net, his best friend, basically, because the other receivers on this team did not have good days. Mike Evans, 1 catch for 31 yards. That's partially due to the coverage. Antonio Brown, 5 catches, 22 yards, and a touchdown coming off the knee injury. And Chris Godwin, 2 catches for 9 yards. So it really, Brady didn't have to do much because the Chiefs' offense was so bad against this Tampa Bay defense. But when he did have to do something, it was surprisingly Rob Gronkowski, who he went to.
Yeah, I'd definitely say Gronk was the most surprising player in this game, because throughout most of the playoffs, he was used as a blocking tight end. Even throughout most of the year, he kind of had that role, because really that's one of his strengths. Even though he's a tremendous receiver, blocking is one of his biggest strengths, and they were utilizing him in that sense, helping the run game with Leonard Fournette and Ronald Jones. And really, Gronk wasn't viewed as one of their biggest threats in terms of pass catching, but he had 2 touchdowns, 67 yards. He was Brady's main go-to guy in this game. He was targeted more than anybody else, even with Mike Evans, even with Chris Godwin. He proved that he wasn't just here to get a free ring. I mean, he brought blocking to this offense. He brought great trust for Tom Brady as a weapon, and he played great in the most important game of the year for them. So Gronk was very surprising for me. Gronk and Brady together might be one of the best duos ever, in my opinion. And this just adds to the legacy that they have as teammates. And it just proved that him coming back out of retirement, Brady not retiring yet and giving it one more chance, it paid off. It paid off for them, and it changed Tampa Bay's franchise forever.
Definitely changed them forever. And I think other than Rice and Montana, Brady and Gronk is the next best duo of quarterback to pass catcher. You could maybe make the argument for Marvin Harrison, Peyton Manning, but I don't even think that is remotely close. It's Gronk and Brady or Rice and Montana as the best duos.
I think they're definitely quarterback tight end duo.
Oh, quarterback tight end,
Unmatched,
without question.
in my opinion.
Yeah. Another player who had a massive game, and this has been a trend kind of all playoffs, Leonard Fournette. After a really not great regular season, being in Ronald Jones' shadow, when Ronald Jones got hurt, Leonard Fournette stepped up in a big way. And same in the Super Bowl. 16 carries, 89 yards, 1 touchdown, while also chipping in 4 catches for 46 yards. What impressed you most about Leonard Fournette, a guy who we'll talk more about the free agents for Tampa Bay in a moment, like who's going to be a free agent this offseason? He must have immensely helped his value, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they called him Playoff Lenny for a reason. He had a tremendous playoff run this year, but also back when he was with the Jaguars and they made their playoff run. He played great in their playoff series too, and that was as a rookie. So he has a tendency to come up big in big games. I think it's just because he runs so much harder than everybody else. He's not the fastest guy. He's not the most elusive guy. But he puts his head down and he runs 10, 15 yards down the field. He moves the chains and he gets it done in the red zone too. He got a touchdown in this game, had a touchdown in the championship game as well. He played great in these playoffs. He played great with Jacksonville in the playoffs. And it's funny because he made it to the championship game back in 2017 with the Jaguars and he lost to Brady. Now he was with Brady. I think that helped feed into his performance and it really helped him just with that chip on his shoulder. I mean, he was cut from the Jaguars after being the 4th overall pick not too long ago. And the Buccaneers took a flyer on him, gave him some reps. Didn't do much in the regular season. Ronald Jones definitely had the more production in the regular season. But in the playoffs, they relied a lot on Fournette with Jones' injury to move the rock and be a reliable running back. And that's exactly what he's been.
Byron Leftwich, I mean, the offensive coordinator for Tampa Bay, he and Todd Bowles really should be in consideration for head coaching jobs because what they were able to do, Bowles with the defense, Byron Leftwich, which the offense, is remarkable in this game. Antonio Brown, like we mentioned, another guy who the Buccaneers took a flyer on this season, was a major contributor. But I want to look at this upcoming free agency period for Tampa Bay because they got some big names on it. I'm looking at it right now. Some notable guys on their current roster that are going to be free agents. Shaquille Barrett, Levante David, Gronk, and Ndamukong Suh, Playoff Lenny, AB, Chris Godwin are some of the big names. And then there are more I'm trying to look out. I mean, Jaden Mickens has been their return man, so that's kind of important. I'm trying to see. Steve McClendon was another big guy in the middle at defensive tackle, but that's really it from the big name guys, free agents. So, first of all, is there any one of the names I just mentioned that you think will not be back in Tampa Bay, assuming they don't retire? Obviously, retiring is different. I'm more so talking about they leave Tampa Bay for another team, and if so, who?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think there's some players. That was a long list. I don't remember everyone you just mentioned. I think
I'll
one
give,
person
I'll
I
give you
know.
5 names. I'll give you 5 names.
All right.
Shaq Barrett, Levante David, Gronk, AB, Chris Godwin.
All right, so I think Shaquille Barrett's the biggest lock. There was talks about maybe they were going to franchise tag him. They also have Chris Godwin, who they could franchise tag. So it'll be up to those two who will franchise tag. But I think Shaq Barrett, because he led the league in sacks last year, he had a great year this year. He was big in the Super Bowl. He was big in the playoffs for them. Their edge presence was a huge reason they won the Super Bowl, and he is arguably their best edge rusher. So I think re-signing him is almost a no-brainer. I think one of their weapons could definitely be on the move. It'd be hard to see them with all these weapons again next year. I think Mike Evans, they absolutely have to re-sign.
Well, Evans is already locked up. It's Godwin or Gronk.
Oh, you didn't say Evans. You said Godwin. Sorry. Godwin, I think that honestly, if the price isn't too high, I mean, he's a very good player. We saw him do great things last year. He had big games this year as well. He also had some big drops and didn't do much in the Super Bowl. Only had 9 yards. So with all these weapons, I think that kind of took away from some of the targets coming Chris Godwin's way. But I nonetheless think he's a very valuable weapon in this team. And if maybe Gronk doesn't come back, maybe they could afford to keep Godwin as well because it'd be important to have Evans and Godwin together.
I mean, I think it would definitely be important. I think of all the guys who could be out after next season or will be not on the roster, Godwin is going to be the one. I think he's going to be trying to get his money, and as he should. He's very talented. Maybe Antonio Brown as well, but I feel like Gronk is going to be willing to come back on a cheaper deal. The Buccaneers should and have to try to keep Shaq Barrett, like you just mentioned. He's their best pass rusher. Levante David has been a Buccaneer his entire career. I don't see why he would leave now for another team. Fournette, I think, is someone who could probably come back on a cheap deal if assuming he wants to run it back. Maybe if the deal is right, he'd go somewhere else, but I find it unlikely. Someone would really have to offer him a big deal. And same with Ndamukong Suh. He's getting up there in age. I don't know how many guys are going to want a 34-year-old defensive tackle for an expensive price tag. They'll probably try to keep him under on a lesser deal. But it's going to be very interesting to see what they have going forward. But they still are going to have Tom Brady under contract. They're still going to have their coaching staff. I assume no one's leaving. Bruce Arians, he finally gets that Super Bowl ring that he's been waiting for as a coach. So this team could run it back. Do you think they will run it back in 2021? Assuming no one leaves right now. Obviously, if someone leaves, we'll reassess in the future.
Yeah, that's the thing. With free agency, with drafts, with possible injuries next year, it's really hard to predict if they'll come back to the Super Bowl. But will they be a great playoff team? Absolutely. I don't think they'll take much of a step back. I think they'll be one of the best teams in the NFC, and they'll definitely have a shot to go back to the Super Bowl. But also, can't forget teams like Niners, who made the Super Bowl last year, had a bucket list of injuries, but they're all coming back. They have great young players on this team, have pretty high draft pick in this class. I think the Niners will be right at things in the NFC. Depending on if Breeze comes back, the Saints could be at the top again, just like they were this year. And the Packers, Aaron Rodgers is not going anywhere. So there's a lot of teams in the NFC who could definitely go to the Super Bowl next year. I think the Bucs have as good of a chance as anybody because they have Tom Brady. Assuming also, we haven't seen the drop off yet. Mentioning it, he just won a Super Bowl last night, so it doesn't seem like there is really a drop off.
He hasn't fallen off the cliff yet.
But we've seen there could be a ravine coming soon. There could be a type of dip that could affect how far they go in the playoffs. But I think even in the regular season, if his numbers are down, he doesn't look as strong, maybe as he did this year. Come playoff time, he's a different breed. He knows how to win games. So even if he doesn't have the same arm, even if the production's not as great, even if they lose a weapon like Godwin in the offseason, I think that just his ability to win games in the playoffs is enough for them. If they make the playoffs next year, which they most likely will, if they keep at least the majority of these players, they have a very good chance to be a pretty high seed in the playoffs. And with Brady's history of going to 10 Super Bowls in 21 years, winning 7 of those 10 Super Bowls, the fact that he just knows how to win, if the Buccaneers find themselves in the playoffs again next year, I think Brady has a very good chance to lead them back to the Super Bowl.
Very good chance indeed. I like how you mentioned some of the teams that could be the toughest competitors, at least in the NFC. I do agree with you, Green Bay. If they can add one more weapon, they are a definite threat to the Buccaneers. 49ers, if they can get back healthy, and who knows, maybe they're in the talks for Deshaun Watson. So if they get him, that's a definite contender. Even with their current roster, everyone healthy, I think they could still be a tough threat. And now the Rams, too, with Matthew Stafford and all their weapons. That's another team who I'm looking at that could be tough. No one from the NFC East, maybe the Cowboys if Dak Prescott is back into where he was before. But I think it's going to take a while for him to get back. No one else in the NFC North. NFC South, if Atlanta could finally figure their stuff out, possibly, but unlikely.
I doubt it.
And in the NFC West, Rams, the Niners, maybe Seattle, but then again, I don't know where I feel.
They looked really bad in the playoffs.
They looked so bad, right?
Very, very bad.
So we'll see.
And also, I was going to say, I'm glad you mentioned the Rams because after I listed those teams, I'm like, I feel like something just happened. And yes, the Matthew Stafford trade, it just happened and made the Rams a very serious contender. I might put them just at the top with the Buccaneers, the Packers, teams like that. The Rams could easily go to the Super Bowl next year. I think Stafford's huge for that team, but we'll get to that at a later point. We'll stick to this.
We'll talk about that another day. Free agency is going to be huge for this, and we'll talk about NFL free agency in the coming episode. One final note, unless there's something else you want to talk about. I was watching this on First Take today. Did Tom Brady secure his spot as the GOAT of all GOATs in team sports? Let's be real here. 21 years, 10 Super Bowl appearances, 7 wins. 3 of which came in his early seasons. Then he goes from, I believe, 28 years old to 36 without winning. He's won a Super Bowl, 4 Super Bowls since turning 37. So, and he's now done it with 2 teams over a longevity career. He's been good the entire time, basically. Other GOATs possible. Jordan, obviously, with 6 titles, 6-0 in the NBA Finals, and just a remarkable career. LeBron, 9 championship appearances, or no, more than that. 10, 11, 10. See, I'm a Lakers fan. I honestly can't remember how many titles LeBron has been to because he's only been to the one with the Lakers. 10 titles, 3 wins, or 4 wins, excuse me. All those losses, but still, the fact that he went to 9 straight from time with Miami and Cleveland is still very impressive. Or 8 straight, excuse me. You could also go with someone like a Roger Federer, a Serena Williams, a Tiger Woods, and then maybe if you want to go a little bit older. But did Brady secure his spot of the GOAT of all GOATs?
I think it's definitely between him and Jordan. I mean, if you think about every sport, Brady's go to football, MJ go to basketball, Gretzky go to hockey. I don't know much about Gretzky. Maybe that diehard hockey fans, he's Tom Brady and Jordan combined. But what was that?
From a statistical standpoint, Wayne Gretzky is a anomaly amongst anomalies in terms of
exactly. So people could argue that maybe he's the greatest GOAT of all time. So I think it's better to keep it to each sport. I think Tom Brady, though, obviously is the best football player of all time. It's hard to argue that he has more titles than any other franchise, which is mind-boggling. That is, in a team sport, one player could have more titles than any franchise in its 100-plus year history, depending on the franchise. It's just pretty wild. But yes, Tom Brady, the fact that in a team sport, the fact that he half the time he gets to the biggest game of the year, the fact that the playoffs are in 7-game series, it's a do or die, go home situation, and he's able to win in so many situations at such a high percentage. I think it's hard to argue in terms of winning. I think Brady's the best winner ever.
Yeah.
Maybe not the best athlete, maybe not best GOAT. I think just winning games in your sport, nobody does it more. Sure, Bill Russell had 11, which is technically more, but he did it in a very different era against much worse competition. And yeah, it was a totally different time back then. Tom Brady, what he's done in a very tough sport, plays only, like I mentioned, 1 game in the playoffs. It's just, I think it's really hard to argue that he's the best winner in football and the best winner in sports.
Yeah, I think you mentioned a good point. In team sport, Tom Brady is the GOAT. He's the greatest winner, he's the greatest in any team sport. Individual sports is probably a different type of discussion, but that's also individual. You're not relying on anyone else. What Brady's been able to do for his career is just remarkable. And I mean, I didn't want to root for Tom Brady at all, but we have to recognize that we will never in our lifetimes see something like this in the NFL. We could see another NBA player win 6. LeBron heck could in the next couple of years. We could see someone put up the statistical numbers like Brady has, like Breeze has. I mean, Patrick Mahomes is already on the spot, but no one in over a 21-year stretch is going to be able to, A, play at a high level every single season that he's played, B, do it consistently, 3, do it in the biggest moments and win. Because John Elway, remind you, he was able to get to multiple Super Bowls, but he only won 2, and that came at the end of his career with a completely different team. Brady, through every point of his career, from the beginning to the middle to now what is the end, although it doesn't seem like it's going to end anytime soon, he's been able to win. So it is absolutely remarkable. All right, Ryan, do you have any other points we want to talk about from this game? I feel like otherwise we'd be beating a dead horse. But if there's something else you want to mention, by all means.
I mean, great halftime show. I liked that.
I did not like
non-football aspect. I thought it was pretty good. I mean, I just
I'm
like
not
the
a weekend.
songs. I like the weekend. Honestly, I kind of thought the show was a little lame because I don't know. The first half of it was weird. It wasn't in the. I don't know if it was outside the stadium or if it was like on a little stage or what that was.
I think it was a stage.
I don't think it was in the stadium, which was kind of weird, and it looked looked a little strange, but I liked the music and the commercials. I was a little more upset with. I saw
A
more
lot of
Paramount Plus commercials than I ever wish to see again. I saw one essentially every commercial break. Uh, some of the commercials in like the first quarter, I remember laughing, thought were pretty good. But as the game caught on, I don't know if it's because the game was getting kind of boring, kind of a dud, or if the commercials were also just not as good. But I mean, the commercials were a bit of a letdown. But yeah, I mean, those are the only other things I had to add essentially.
Well, halftime performance, I think the way they were doing it, they were in the stadium in that like the area, like you know where that boat is in their Tampa Bay stadium? It was like it wasn't on the field like it usually is. They were up top, I think, for social distancing purposes, obviously. And just to get everything in and out. I was not a huge fan. I mean, the music is cool, but the performance itself, like I was getting dizzy when he was in that inside area. Not gonna lie. And
it did produce some good memes.
What?
It did produce some good memes.
It did produce some good memes. Yes, we do it for the memes. And then the commercials. Well, a lot of the big advertisers were out. Budweiser didn't do a commercial. They had said Doritos. There were a few others. There weren't obviously.
Doritos had that one commercial. They did have one commercial with the flat Matthew McConaughey, which I thought was one of the better ones, actually. I like that one.
What was I going to say? There weren't a whole lot of movie trailers. That's usually a big time now because obviously we don't know what the state of movies is. Paramount Plus, they have a deal with CBS. Like that's the network. Like it's all CBS ads, like shows that are going to be on there.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like that's why they were really pushing it hard. But yeah, I mean, overall, it's not the worst Super Bowl we've seen. You and I have seen a worse one together, actually. But it wasn't the best one. So hopefully next year, I mean, the fact that the NFL was able to get to this point, I mean, I've said this all throughout the playoffs, or we have said it throughout the playoffs. The fact that we were able to play a full regular season, obviously there were a lot of reshuffling of games and reshuffling of the schedule, but no game got actually canceled. And they were able to finish on time like they said they would on February 7th. I mean, that's just kudos to the NFL. Kudos to the players, kudos to the staffs, to the organization themselves, and the league office for really making this possible and being somewhat of an escape for fans all around the world, given how shitty this past year has been.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
It's very impressive they got here.
Very impressive indeed. I think that is a nice place to put a pin in it, close it out for the day. This will not be the last we talk about the NFL. The draft is coming up. Ryan and I did our mock draft last year, the first round. I'm sure we'll do at least one again. NFL free agency is coming up. We got the whole kick and caboodle. We're going to talk a lot more NBA stuff now that the NFL season is over. But thank you all so much for watching, listening, whatever you do during this podcast. We really appreciate it. Ryan, so long, my friend. Enjoy your
next football season.
See you next
Even though we'll be covering more, see you next football season.
Hopefully, next episode we're back in the WERW studios, but unlikely.
Yes.
But we will see.
Yeah, I mean, this could be the last YouTube one. Hopefully, it's honestly.
Everything's going to YouTube.
I do like this. I do like the studio. What? Oh, we do upload the audio.
YouTube, but the last one,
the audio
like this.
Yes, the last Zoom one
until the summer. All right. So long, everyone. Thank you all so much for watching. We'll see you next time on the Show's podcast.